It should never have unfolded the way it did, and yet looking back, it felt as if every quiet choice, every small hesitation. When my husband Tom asked me to look after his 18-year-old nephew Jake while he was away on a business trip, Tom had trusted me completely, believing it would be simple companionship and guidance for a young man preparing for college. But from the very first moment Jake stepped into our home, there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere that neither of us acknowledged out loud, or how conversation would pause just a fraction too long before either of us found an excuse to step away. His expression, unreadable, quickly replaced with polite indifference. Tom had always been confident in our life together, steady in his routines, proud of the home we had built over 5 years of marriage. And I had always believed in that stability too, but something about this arrangement disrupted the balance in ways I struggled to name. Especially when Tom left for Chicago and asked me, almost casually, to make sure Jake stayed focused and comfortable. As though the walls themselves had become more aware of every movement within them, like footsteps in the hallway or the timing of when Jake entered a room, or the way conversations became slightly more deliberate when no one else was around. Jake himself was not what I had expected when I first met him months earlier, back then still a teenager in transition, but now standing on the threshold of adulthood with a quiet confidence that resembled Tom in unsettling ways. Sometimes reserved and thoughtful, other times impulsive in his energy, as if he was constantly searching for direction, especially the weight of following in Tom's footsteps academically and professionally. And in quieter moments he would open up just enough to reveal uncertainty about his future, doubts he rarely expressed to anyone else. And in those moments I found myself listening more carefully than I intended, offering reassurance that felt natural but somehow deeper than I expected. The days passed in a rhythm that should have been ordinary, meals prepared together in the kitchen, casual conversations about college forms. I tried to maintain distance in my mind, reminding myself of roles and responsibilities, of trust and family boundaries, of the life Tom and I had built that should not be complicated by passing emotions. But the human mind does not always obey structure, and there were moments when I caught myself thinking about Jake even when he was not near. His sense of direction in a world that suddenly felt much larger than he was prepared for. And I knew, with uncomfortable clarity, that he too was becoming more aware of me in ways that went beyond politeness or routine respect. Not in anything spoken, but in subtle attention, in the way he lingered in conversations, or how he seemed to notice my presence. Even before I entered a room, as if the atmosphere itself shifted in anticipation. And I told myself repeatedly that nothing would change, that I would simply fulfill the responsibility I had agreed to. Intention were tested not through dramatic events, but through accumulation of small moments. Shared cooking in the kitchen where conversation flowed more easily than expected, walks through ordinary errands that became unexpectedly meaningful, and quiet evenings where silence between us no longer felt empty but full of unspoken thoughts. I began to notice how easily trust develops when two people are left in proximity without distraction. How quickly familiarity can soften caution, and how dangerous it is when emotional understanding begins to feel like connection beyond its intended form. Aware that whatever was forming in this space was not something I could define without consequences. As the days moved forward, I focused on routine, on preparing meals, or a glance held slightly beyond comfort before one of us looked away first. And what unsettled me most was not any single action, but the accumulation of them, forming something I could no longer easily dismiss. By the time several days had passed, I realized that the situation was no longer just about responsibility or hospitality, but about internal conflict, about how easily human boundaries blur when trust, proximity, and emotional vulnerability overlap, and how difficult it becomes to separate what is appropriate from what is simply felt. I began to understand that nothing dramatic needed to happen for a situation to become complicated, that sometimes complexity is born quietly, in shared spaces, in ordinary routines, in the way two people begin to recognize each other beyond surface roles. And as I sat alone one evening after a long day, I understood that the real tension was not external at all, but internal, a silent struggle between duty and awareness, between what I knew I should maintain and what I could not entirely stop myself from noticing. not into resolution, but into awareness that some experiences in life do not need to cross boundaries to leave a permanent mark. They only need to exist long enough to make you realize how fragile those boundaries truly are.